Good morning and welcome to this presentation, everyone. My name is Arsh Patella. I'm a functional consultant with Western Computer, and I will be covering today's presentation. So you can see I'm within Dynamics 365, and let's dive straight in. So you can see that within modules, we have one called Asset Management, and let me collapse all. Let's go into our assets. So that comes up here, and I can go to All Assets. And I'm going to create my first one. So I'll call this asset my CAL-01. You can choose to use whatever you'd like, and I'll call this my Calgary Line 1 Air Knife. And I give it an asset type of air knife. Every asset must have a type, so let's look at some of this. So within an asset type, you can see first you have some information. So right now I have 28 air knives in my entire system. You can set up manufacturers and models, and we can do that up here. So you can see that my air knife comes made by Ford. There's a Model S and a Model T. And what you can say is, what types of jobs am I allowed to do on this asset type? So we have a whole bunch of them that we're allowed, but we don't allow for doing a facility assessment. So one of your asset types can be building, for example. And in a building, you can do a facility assessment, but you can't do a facility assessment on an air knife, which is why it is not allowed. We also have counters, and counters are extremely useful. Counters can be used to track numeric features on an individual asset. And then you can choose whether certain attributes should be defined on the assets, color, configuration. You can see down here my manufacturers and models exist, and all of that is set up on my asset type. There is a life cycle. So you can see here that I'm using the standard life cycle, and while we do have 4 states, the only 2 that get used in this life cycle are active and scrapped. We don't use the new or in repair. You have the ability to do your updates, so from active to scrapped and vice versa. If we go look at the actual statuses themselves, so let me go into assets, and I'm going to go into lifecycle states. You see there's not nearly as much that happens on an asset state. So you just get to define when it's active, and saying active means you can open up a work order against this asset, you can open up a maintenance request, and to delete open schedule lines. So this is useful. Let's say you scrap an asset. Well, maybe 2 weeks from that date, there was supposed to be some maintenance done on there. So to keep your system a little cleaner, you can delete all the open schedule lines that may exist when the asset gets moved to the scrap status. So that's about what you can choose to set up there. If we go back to our asset creation, you can see here I can choose to specify a manufacturer or a model. In this case, I'm not going to do either. You can choose to set in parent assets. So again, this is hierarchical, but I'm not going to do that. And then you set up a functional location. So in my case, this is going to be cal-02-01. So this is a knife that's on my individual line. I can also choose to set up assets that are just directly in my building. So for example, my air conditioner, my photocopier, whatever it may be, would belong in my office, but this specifically belongs to a line. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit OK. And here we are. You can see you can choose to set up some further information. So you can put in the year, a serial number if you'd like. By default, and this is something that you can choose to set up in your parameters, this has a service level of 3, which I believe is high. If you're using the resources in the org admin module, you can tie this to a specific resource. You can also tie this to a fixed asset in the fixed asset module. Note that that's mostly just for reporting purposes. There's no financial link between the two, except for when we do investments. Further down below, you can choose to specify any attributes. You can choose to specify which vendor you bought it from and how much you bought it from. And you can also choose to do maintenance on individual assets, maintenance plans. Maybe you have a monthly inspection on this line, but this is a particularly important asset, so you want to set up weekly. You can choose to set that up as well. And then you can choose to put in financial dimensions. Let's talk about counters. And you may have seen that on my air knife, we had a counter called hours. So you see when I hit this drop down, we just have 1. And this is where you can choose to track something. So you could choose to track your temperature, you can choose to track spin rate, whatever. So for me, I want to say how many hours has my air knife been running? and I can say, okay, it's run 300 hours. I save that. And then a few days, few weeks later, wherever it might be, you can come in and specify that this has now been under my aggregate. It's been running 600. So since my last reading, we've had 300 for a total of 600. This can be useful just for you to track, when do I need to purchase a new one? Think of maybe something like a car. You'd want to track how many miles or kilometers it's driven. You can use this counter functionality. This is a data entity as well. So you can connect this via an OData feed. So you can have it automatically populated. It doesn't need to have it happen manually the way I'm doing it right now. But it's just a nice feature that exists on your individual assets.